This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Got a lot of stuff I want to talk about today. We'll be joined by Chris Hine in just a little bit here to talk Timberwolves trade deadline and the rest of the season. Got some thoughts on the Wild and a big weekend ahead in college sports. But first, what did I miss? You guys, favorite subject of mine, offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings. I talk about it a lot on this podcast, either myself or with guests. Talk about it a lot on the Access Vikings podcast as well. There's a new one of those that just went live, I believe, on Thursday. Vikings have made a trade. We were all kind of sitting there, waiting around on the NBA trade deadline, which we'll get to in a little bit, wondering if the Wolves were going to make a move. And then all of a sudden this Vikings trade pops up. They trade a 6th-round pick, 223rd overall. I believe it was a compensatory pick that they got for Mason Cole. He'll be a 4th-year lineman, still on the last year of a rookie deal, so relatively inexpensive. He started a bunch of games for the Cardinals at center. 2018, I think he started all 16 games, and he started 14 more last year. He's got some versatility on the line. He also, though, does not have the greatest Pro Football Focus grades and whatnot. So here's the thing. The easiest thing to do is to say Vikings didn't really do much. More of the same, right? And I'm kind of in that boat. They need a lot of help on the offensive line. This is not much help, but I think let's zoom out for a little bit here. This is obviously, at least I hope, not the last thing they're going to do to address the offensive line. There's still still the draft. We've seen, mock drafts. Mel Kiper's latest mock drafts has the Vikings moving up to number 9 to pick a star offensive tackle. Sewell, I think, is that tackle. So you get the draft. We've talked about this before with Ben Gessling. They've got Kyle Rudolph's money coming available June 1st, a big chunk of cap change. I think it's around $8 million coming available, but it's not till June 1st. So opportunity to maybe make an upgrade at that point as well when you're looking at guys still out there in free agency or, guys who have become cap casualties and cut downs at the end of training camps, things of that nature. So there are still opportunities for them to get more offensive linemen, and they still have some cap space right now if they want to do that right now. So I guess the bigger picture is let's not overreact to this move. That said, they need quality. They don't necessarily need quantity, right? We've seen them bring in all these guys over the years that, hey, this could be a solution. You got some depth here. You got versatility that, they need good players flat out. And I don't know if Mason Cole qualifies as that. I mean, he qualifies as one of the 50 best centers in all of the world. So, comparatively, compared to me, he's going to be an upgrade, right? But in the big picture of the NFL, is this guy going to meaningfully upgrade your offensive line, or is he just another guy who kind of becomes the default answer when you don't do more to address the position? So, long story short, we're going to watch the Vikings still and see what other moves are coming to upgrade the offensive line. They clearly need help there. I don't think they need they don't need to go out and spend $1 billion or, use all of their draft picks, because as we've talked about again, the difference between a good offensive line and a great offensive line is kind of negligible. You can get by with, an above average, an offensive line in the 12 to 14 range in the NFL is just fine to do probably what they want to do. The problem is in a lot of years they haven't even been that good, and it's ruined some promising seasons for them in the last 7-8 years under Mike Zimmer. So hopefully there's more to come on this, and at the very least, what we do know for very certain is that Rick Spielman has two great loves in this world. If we've been paying attention over the years, it is accumulating mediocre offensive linemen and accumulating late round draft picks. And I'm just happy, at the very least, for Rick Spielman that this was a net neutral in that pursuit, that he even though he had to give up one of those precious late round 6th round pick in this case, he was able at least to acquire a seemingly mediocre offensive lineman in return. So it's a net neutral there. So good for Rick Spielman, and we'll see what else he has up his sleeve over the next few months as they try to finally figure out the offensive line.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
I'd like to welcome in to Daily Delivery for the fifth time, Five Timers Club. Chris Hine covers the Star Tribune. Covers the Timberwolves for the Star Tribune. Covers the whole thing. He covers all of it.
Yes.
Covered the trade deadline, NBA trade deadline on Thursday, which turned out to be kind of anticlimactic. We'll get into that. We'll get into kind of where the Wolves go from there, why they maybe didn't do anything at this deadline while they were really, really active a year ago. Chris, first off, welcome. Thanks for being on once again.
This is the highlight of my week every time I come on here.
Man,
having me.
It's pressure. That's pressure. I got to deliver here in the next 15, 20 minutes.
Maybe it also tells you about how my weeks generally go.
Oh, well,
vaccines are on the way.
Your week was decent. I think the Wolves were on to something a little bit at the start of the second half of the season, had that blowout win over the Pelicans, had a good start to that road trip. Then they've lost a few games since then. Then the trade deadline is what I really want to focus on, though. They don't do anything. You listened to the Gerson Rosas news conference. You kind of followed the kind of back and forth of would they make a move, would they not make the move? What's your takeaway from the inactivity, I guess, that ended up being the story of this deadline?
So I think the biggest part of it was Gerson Rosas was unwilling to part with some of the Wolves' younger talent to make potentially an Aaron Gordon trade or something like it happen. B, and you kind of alluded to this on Twitter in your tweet about saying that Malik Beasley and D'Angelo Russell are like, is he going to say that getting those two guys back is like making a trade at the deadline? He didn't say that specifically. What he said was that he would like to see everybody together playing because for one reason or another, whether it be injuries or COVID, we haven't seen what Karl Anthony Towns, Malik Beasley, D'Angelo Russell, and now the improving Anthony Edwards look like when all of them are available to play.
Let's actually stop and play that quote from Rosas right now so people can hear the full thing in all its splendor.
Trade is a major vehicle of our team building, but considering that we've done 9-10 trades over the last 18-24 months, there is a period of time where you got to see what you have and you have to evaluate it. I don't think there's any other team that's more aggressive than us in the NBA in terms of pursuing opportunities. This deadline, like every deadline, is different. We pursued all the options that were available. And in a lot of ways, you have to have a reason to make a trade. You don't make a trade for the sake of making a trade. I like the group we have. We haven't seen this group together enough, starting with our best two players and everybody else. And that played a big part in it. We want to see what we have in order to make the best educated decisions we can make.
I think that was a big part, is that you want to use the next 7-8 weeks, however long the season lasts here, as a key evaluation point in what this team actually needs going forward. It's hard to make moves or it's hard to project what this team needs when you don't get to see kind of this mix of players together. So I get it from that perspective. So I would expect this to be kind of that time, knock on wood that everybody stays healthy and nothing else goes wrong and that they're actually able to play these games together. But it's mostly just seeing what they have. And he didn't want to give up any young talent for a potential move that may or may not work.
Don't they need a power forward no matter what, though? I mean, that was the thing
he said that. He said that during the press conference, that power forward was the priority. It is still a need moving forward. So that hasn't changed. It's just that I think the big thing from what I had heard was that they weren't willing to part with Jaden McDaniels, and anybody that was looking to make a deal with the Wolves potentially wanted McDaniels. Nobody was expecting the Wolves to part with Anthony Edwards, but McDaniels was very much on the table. For other teams at least, but the Wolves did not want to move on from him because I think you saw Wednesday night when he had the task of guarding Luka Doncic, and he did a pretty decent job doing it. I think you saw if you've been watching the games, if you've been able to watch the games, thanks to the streaming wars, you see that there is potential with Jaden McDaniels, that they might have found something with the late first round pick here, and they're not willing to part with that just yet. And, again, a few more months and maybe you revisit some of these moves or potential talks in the off season. But as it stood right now, it just didn't make sense for them to make a move.
Yeah, and I get that. I get that you want to see what you have. I get that McDaniels has been better than you would have thought, faster than you would have thought. And that, I think Malik Beasley was probably the most, when you looked at it as a trade piece that some other team might want, as a salary match, as someone who's on someone who's on a contract that is going to look pretty reasonable, I think, for the next few years, that he could be someone who could be the centerpiece of a John Collins trade, who could be the centerpiece of an Aaron Gordon trade. But, maybe the overriding sentiment was either that they want to see how he fits into what they have, or that other teams didn't think that Beasley plus whatever else they were willing to give up was enough for, some of those other bigger gets that they could have got. So it makes sense. I think the flip side of this is, I got the sense, in just, talking to Bobby Marks a few weeks ago, that he was not anticipating that they would make a big move, but he thought they might make one or two smaller moves to kind of prune the edges of their roster. And I feel like they would have liked to do that. And the fact that they weren't able to do that, not able to move like a Jarrett Culver or a Josh Okogie, like the glut of, one-dimensional wings that they seem to have, none of that got cleared out. And that's not to say that they can't keep looking at what they have in those guys under Chris Finch and do something in the offseason. But what about that piece to you, that they didn't even make a small move to kind of, try to bring in something different or, gain some flexibility in that way?
Yeah, I think that was probably the more surprising thing for me, was that there was just no moves at all. Not that there wasn't a major move, but that there wasn't a move around the edges of the roster, like you said. So I guess it speaks to kind of what Roses was saying, that he, after all these moves that they've made in the last year, that he wanted some kind of stability and continuity for everybody. And so I as of now, I'm not aware of kind of what was potentially out there in terms of a, Jarrett Culver deal or what have you, or what the interest level was in some teams even acquiring these kind of players. I would assume that if you were going to deal somebody like Culver, it would be like, let's trade our guy who's maybe could use a change of scenery for somebody else's guy who could use a change of scenery.
Right.
But, it's not really an upgrade or a downgrade kind of move to make. So I guess they just decided to stand pat in terms of any of those kind of moves, because there wasn't much value, and you might be giving something away that could end up working long term as you try to get some more continuity here.
So Beasley's back when? He's back this weekend, right?
Saturday.
So he's back Saturday. He's got one more game he's sitting out. Is that right?
Yeah, he'll be out Friday's game, and then he'll be eligible to come back Saturday.
And we're thinking D'Lo might start working out with the team soon, or practicing with the team. Is that what we know?
Either this weekend or early next week, he'll resume team activities.
Which would probably mean he's probably
earlier in the week.
Maybe
probably
like
about a week. Yeah.
Week to 10 days out, maybe
10 days,
for
I think
him.
is fair.
So you're talking about what they're 10 and 33 right now? Is that what they are?
10 and 34.
10 and 34. Sorry, I don't mean to shortchange them a loss. Certainly don't want to do that. But 44 games, that means 32 left. So yeah, by the time he came, 44, 28 left.
28 left, yeah.
So basically by the time he came back, you'd be talking about, somewhere in the low to mid 20 games left in the season. And we talked about this coming out of the break, but it seems even more salient now that they have to learn something in those games if they have everybody they want, or at least the core pieces healthy, Towns, Edwards, Beasley, and Russell. If they got all four of those guys for the last 20 to 25 games, you'd like to see some sort of progress, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's, again, goes back to why we saw them not make a move today. And I think another thing that Rose has touched on in his press conference was, just because a move wasn't made now doesn't mean it can't be made down the road. That, potential seeds were planted, ideas floated that, they could maybe revisit at the in the off season. John Collins obviously was heavily rumored, but John Collins will be entering restricted free agency in the summer, and anything can happen there. So you never do know. To me, the Gordon thing, I always struggled seeing Gordon coming here, and I don't know how you felt about this, but
I felt the same way. I felt the same way about him. I never thought he was the right target.
The fact that he was an unrestricted free agent, or will be an unrestricted free agent after next season, always struck me as a little odd, because you'd be making a move, giving up significant assets for somebody who you might just have for a little more than a year, because there's significant risk that he doesn't like it here, and then he walks when he's a free agent. So that one never made 100% sense if the Wolves had to give up a lot to get him. If you didn't have to give up a lot, then maybe you do it. But you saw what Denver gave up, which was Gary Harris. I think it was RJ McDaniel in a first round pick. That's a decent haul. That's a decent haul.
Yeah, I agree. I thought they gave up, so that was basically their 2020 first round pick, a future pick, I think it's 2025. And then, Gary Harris, who's been kind of up and down, has had some injury problems, but is still a pretty good player for a guy who, no guarantee that he'll be here beyond a season from now. But it makes more sense for a team like Denver that,
who's a little more competitive.
More competitive, kind of wants someone that could help them win this year and next year. I don't know if that puts them over the top, like over the Lakers or anybody else like that.
I think it helps them in the short term for sure.
So it always made sense that Gordon was maybe more going to go to a contender and not the Wolves, based on he's not quite a rental since he's got another year left, but he's more in that mold. And that Collins, I'm glad you brought him up, because he's obviously been my object of affection trade wise, just because I like the way he plays and because the fit seemed right because of the position he plays, the style he plays, and that restricted free agency. So I imagine that they could, is that the kind of thing where, like you said, the off season, he would be a restricted free agent. Is that someone that they would maybe revisit in kind of a sign and trade situation where you could then, let's say by the summer, they know what their draft pick situation is because they'll have done the lottery by then. They'll know if they have their 2021 or 2022 pick, which one it is, that they could trade one of the other ones basically in that deal. Or, if Malik Beasley becomes back in play, something like that, they get a longer look at Jaden McDaniels, things like that seeds have been planted in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, the only drawback is now Atlanta has that control over him, and can match any offer the Wolves may make. But like you said, the potential for a sign and trade exists, depending on how that situation plays out. So, I think that's still something that's maybe worth monitoring as the off season approaches. But yeah, I was surprised, a few weeks ago when those rumors were circulating that Atlanta was so seemingly willingly ready to move on from him. And I think they came to their senses a little bit in the last few weeks and said, hey, maybe we should try to hang on to this guy and try to re-sign him.
Well, and don't forget too, when those rumors were the hottest, they were going in a bad way. And then they, fired their coach, their schedule got easier. They won like 8 or 9 in a row, and suddenly they're in the playoff mix, and it makes sense to at least keep Collins through this season, and maybe beyond. We'll see what they want to do. It does still seem like they have a glut of bigs there with Clint Capella being there, with Gallinari being there, and whatnot. It seems like they've kind of, and Hunter can maybe play a little bit of that as well. So yeah, that remains a kind of like we talked about when they got D'Angelo Russell. They went after him hard in free agency, didn't get him then, but the interest remained, and they were able to execute that trade and eventually get him. Now, again, that trade came at a cost because, as we've talked about, that draft pick is looming over them. And, how do you think they're looking at this right now? Because the more they win, the less likely they are to keep their pick, but those odds are still not great. Perfect world, it seems like they play well enough to feel like they've got some progress, but they're still able to somehow, squeeze out that 40% and keep that pick. But that's, it's more likely than not, no matter what, that they end up giving that pick. So how do you feel like they are approaching, win at all costs over the last 28
Yeah.
games of this season to see how this goes.
Well, I think they're not going to try to tank in any. Like I just don't see what the purpose is, and I think just for the organizational stability, and you need to put some wins on the board. Like I don't know how much longer you can go on losing. You go into the off season if you don't have the start of an upward trajectory, it could be another miserable off season. Try to win as many games as you can because, and let's face it, if you finish in the bottom three group, which is likely, I was kind of looking at the records the other day. Your odds don't change whether you're the worst team, right, or the third worst team. That's something for people to keep in mind, that you could be the third worst team, still have the same odds of landing in the top three as the first pick. It might be slightly different, but not much.
I think it's pretty much the same. It might be like percentage points, but it's not much.
Yeah. But even then, like, if you finish fourth or fifth, like it doesn't go down a ton. I think winning games and trying to get some sense of positivity going in the organization, some sense of direction, trumps a couple percentage points of a draft pick. That's just my take.
Yeah, it seems like that's the boat they're into. I don't think they would have switched courses with their head coach if they didn't want to lay some foundation and try to win some games now. Obviously they're disappointed with, their record right now and the way things have gone, and would like to change that. Final thought, when Beasley and Russell come back, Beasley certainly sooner than later, and that's more assured since that's not an injury we're talking about. That's a finite amount of time, a suspension, returning from that. Well, how do you see the playing time, changing? You're a 10-34 team, so it's not like you're worrying about hurting too many egos or having too many good players. But who, when those guys are back on the court, does Rubio go back to the bench? Do you put Beasley into a sixth man role? How do you put the big four on the court together and see what you got? How do you think you divide that up?
Yeah, and Rose has kind of addressed this about how the Rubio-Russell pairing wasn't really working early in the season. And so I think it's going to be fascinating to see how, if they decide to keep the two ball handlers on the floor, does Rubio go back to the bench? He has said that he prefers to start. He'll do so. He'll go to the bench if needed, or if he thinks it's the best thing to win. But they weren't exactly winning when he was on the bench before. So it's going to be fascinating. I think he ends up being the odd man out because or maybe there are nights Edwards is the odd man out because rookie mistakes. Maybe his shot selection's poor enough, and that Finch decides to pull him like he did late in the game the other night. But yeah, I see Beasley, Russell, Towns, Edwards. Again, it leaves kind of a hole in terms of like who's going to play well, actually, no, it doesn't leave the hole in terms of who plays the four. Only if you have Rubio does it leave that hole. But it's going to be fascinating to see how they divvy up the minutes. I don't know. That's why I'm not the coach, Mike, and I don't make millions of dollars. So
no, we don't. But it's interesting, and again, it's not because they have this abundance of great players, but injuries and absences have created opportunities that people have taken advantage of in fits and spurts. And it'll be interesting to see how, kind of who sticks in the rotation, who winds up on the bench, and, how much they want to see those four players together versus how they want to see, kind of different roles and how that plays out. So bottom line is they didn't do anything to shake up the roster at the deadline, and we'll see how this team kind of responds from there. And maybe some of the poor play in the last couple games is, something you wrote about the other day, that they're, you kind of get some young guys that are a little nervous about what might happen.
Yeah. And, maybe now that fog has lifted a little bit, you can focus in on just playing for the last 20 odd games of the year here.
Yep. Sounds good, Chris. Well, I'll get you that Five Timers jacket any day now.
Yes.
Appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you again soon. Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Always enjoy talking to Chris Hine. Obviously, I've had him on 5 times now. Five Timers Club, going to get him that jacket too. I really think the John Collins thing is one to watch as we go forward. It feels very similar to the D'Angelo Russell pursuit, where they've identified someone they really want. They've been talking to Atlanta for a while now, it sounds like, about, going back to even like pre-draft conversations about acquiring John Collins. So let's keep an eye on this. Even if it didn't happen right now, maybe it didn't make all the sense in the world right now, it might make a lot of sense this summer in a sign and trade scenario or something like that, where they're able to add John Collins, a player they seem to covet. So we'll see if they're able to pull that off at a certain point here.
Alexi, change this face. Be happy. Enjoy it.
Okay, change this face applies today to the Minnesota Wild and more or less the fans. And this is only a small sense I'm getting right now. It's not the worst thing in the world, and I think we should hold teams to a certain standard of play, that it's not just about results all the time, but I do feel like we're getting in this territory, and this happens when teams achieve a certain level of success, right? We start to want more. And so the Wild we've certainly recalibrated our expectations with the Wild this year, right? We started out, didn't really know what to expect from this team. Are they a year away? Are they 2 years away? Well, they turned out to be pretty good this year, playing in this condensed schedule. I think, there's been some surprises. I think, Kaprizov has been even better than we could have imagined. I think they've gotten some depth that maybe didn't exist before, and certainly the goaltending has been better than it was in past years, really solidified with both Cam Talbot coming over in free agency and Kaapo Kähkönen taking a big step forward. They win again 2-0 on Thursday, but they get outshot like 37-11 against St. Louis. Post-game, they acknowledge they didn't play great, right? That's not an aesthetically pleasing win. That's not a sustainable model for, winning a lot of games, getting outshot by more than a 3-1 margin. It was a very Jacques Lemaire era game, and that's not, again, that proved to not be a very sustainable model. But why the change of the face is this: they're winning. You got to enjoy the success, even if it comes in a certain type of package. And you still had a beautiful Kaprizov goal in that game, and you still had Cam Talbot reasserting himself as, if not number one, at least 1A between the net, and giving Dean Evison something to think about when he makes a goalie choice every single night. So I don't want to get bogged down at this point in the micro of every game, or how did they win? Was it pleasing enough to the eye? Did they do enough? Let's just enjoy a few wins here for a team that at the start of the year, we wouldn't have projected them to win this many games in the first place. So, the winning will take care of itself. I'm sure they'll play better and look better in certain games, and maybe lose some of those games too. So it all kind of evens out. Change the face, okay? Just enjoy it. Let's end with the cooler. So much to watch this weekend. That's my message to you Saturday. I hope you were fully prepared to put in some couch time on Saturday, because you got not only NCAA men's basketball Sweet 16 games, NCAA women's basketball Sweet 16 games, and Gophers men's hockey, in addition to other in-state college hockey teams playing in the NCAA tournament first round. Gophers play Omaha late Saturday. If they advance and win that game, it would be Sunday for a chance to go to the Frozen Four against either Minnesota State or Quinnipiac. So it's a great time of year, you guys. We got to take advantage of it. We got to watch these sports. These moments don't always come. Last year we were sitting on our couches and nothing was happening. Nothing was happening at all. There was no sports at all. So don't forget that. Let's enjoy this weekend. Get some good sports watching in, and we'll see what the outcome is by Monday. But it should be very good and fun viewing at the very least. That'll do it for me this week on Daily Delivery. Thanks for listening today, Friday. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you find your finer podcast. Write a review; it really helps. Leave a rating, as long as it's a good one, and subscribe always to Star Tribune and StarTribune.com, because that helps us as well. We'll be back at this again on Monday. For Daily Delivery, I'm Michael Rand. Have a great weekend, everybody.